After completing this lesson, you will be able to understand object styles, understand line weights, line patterns and line styles, edit object styles and create your own line patterns. The objective domains covered are 5.5, control the appearance of elements at a project level. Object styles are project-wide settings that control line weights, line styles, colours and materials for each category and subcategory. Typically, these settings will form the backbone of your Revit template. Line weights control the thickness of lines for model elements and annotations. Revit has 16 line thicknesses that can be used for model line weights, perspective line weights, and annotation line weights. Model line weights can be assigned a thickness at given scale factors. For example, line weight 2 may appear thicker for 1 inch equals 1 foot than for 1/8 of an inch equals 1 foot. Line patterns are used to represent items such as hidden detail, centers, and grid lines. Revit has several default line patterns, and these can be edited to your requirements, or you can create your own patterns. The line patterns can consist of dots, spaces, and lines. Line styles are a combination of line patterns, color, and line weights. They can be used for 2D annotations and are also used to represent other elements in Revit such as sketch lines. Typically, object styles, line weights, line patterns, and line styles will be set up and stored in a Revit template file. Your new projects are then started from this template. Go ahead and open up the model 040, Editing Object Styles. The model opens up in the 5th floor plan. Let's start by investigating the Object Style dialog box. To do this, select the Manage ribbon and then select Object Styles. In the Object Styles dialog box, you'll note that we have 4 tabs across the top: Model Objects, Annotation Objects, Analytical Model Objects, and Imported Categories. Let's begin by taking a look at Model Objects. Now, of course, any changes we make in the Object Styles dialog box is project-wide. If we want to make a change to just one view, we would go ahead and use Visibility Graphic Overrides. Any changes we make in the Object Styles dialog box is project-wide, and generally this will be saved into a project template. Let's now take a closer look. For example, if we look at structural framing, we'll notice here that the projection line weight is using pen number 1. The cut line weight is using pen number 4. The line color is black. The line pattern is solid, and you'll notice here that we have a default material applied. Let's now take a look at the subcategories of structural framing. So you'll see a lot of the default subcategories already being displayed here, but I've also created my own subcategory. This was created in a specific family, and you can see here that we have parapet framing. The projection is set to 1. However, when we cut it, it uses a thinner pen, so this is set to 2. And what I'm going to do here is change the color, perhaps to green, and change the line type to maybe dash. Now, like I've said, this is going to now be a global change to the project. So if I click OK here, straight away you'll see that the framing now turns green. But also, if perhaps I open up the south elevation, the parapet is also shown in that dashed green line. So as you can see here, this is a global change. Okay, let's return back to our 5th floor plan. This time we'll make a change to some annotation. On the Manage ribbon, let's select Object Styles. And here we'll select Annotation Objects. Let's now make a change to the grids. So you can see here we have grid heads. So I'm going to change the pen weight perhaps to pen number 5. And I'll change the color to red. And again here, this will now be a global change. So once again, if we switch back to the south elevation, you can see the grid heads in the south elevation have also undergone this global change. You'll notice that the object styles is heavily dependent on line weights and line patterns. Let's now take a look at how we can configure line weights and line patterns. To do this, on the Manage ribbon, we can select Additional Settings. In additional settings, let's begin with line patterns. In the line patterns dialog box, you can see that we have a number of default lines already configured for us. However, we can also create our own line patterns. So I'm going to go ahead here and create a line pattern for my parapet framing. So let's click New. Here, I'll type in parapet framing. And now I can begin to define my line pattern. The line patterns can be comprised of dashes, dots, or spaces. So I'm going to begin with a dash, and I want my first dash to be plotted on the screen at 1/8 of an inch. Then we'll follow that with a space, and a space would also be 1/8 of an inch. So that's my line pattern created. If I click OK, this is now going to be repeated, as you can see here. Those dimensions that I've specified there for the dash and the space relates to the printed output on sheet. So I can just go ahead and select OK to line patterns. Now, just so we can see that applied to this particular model, I can go back to my object styles. I can go and find structural framing, expand the subcategories, select my parapet framing, and now, of course, in here, I can do a search for parapet framing, and there's my new line pattern that I've just created. If I click OK, everything's now updated. Now, of course, any subsequent changes I make to that line pattern will then update the entire project globally. So let's take a look at that. If I now go back to line patterns, and I go ahead and find my parapet line type, let's edit this. And now I'm going to change this to 1/16. And we'll do the same for the space as well. And instantly you'll now see that the entire project updates. So any object style or visibility graphic override that's using that new line pattern will now update. Let's also look at line weights. Again, if I go to Manage Ribbon and Additional Settings, I can select line weights. Now here you'll notice we have 3 tabs across the top. The model line weights are referring to model elements. We have 16 possible line weights that we can apply, and then we have scales across the top. The Add button is to add new additional scales. If I select the annotation line weights, these aren't dependent on scale, and again we have 16 line weights. Of course, I can come in here and configure these line weights to whatever I like. Let's go ahead and select OK. Finally, let's take a look at line styles. Select the Manage ribbon and then select Additional Settings and then select Line Styles. In the line styles, you notice that we have again already configured a number of different line styles. We can clearly create new line styles down here if we want to. A line style will then have a name, a thickness for the projection, a color, and a particular line pattern. An obvious one we can look at here is the line style for sketch. So you'll notice this is using pen 3 and magenta. So I'm going to change this. Let's make it red. And perhaps we'll get this using my new line style for the parapet. So what's now going to happen is this. If I now sketch something, for example, if I go to Structure and I select Floor and I now produce a sketch, you'll see my sketched geometry is now using that edited line style.